Everyone thinks the iceberg doomed Titanic, but the real mistake was made long before the ship ever set sail, when powerful men decided lifeboats for half the passengers counted as safe. Outdated laws and unchecked confidence meant no one slowed down, even as ice warnings piled up. If the disaster began with a fatal decision, what else went unquestioned until it was too late? In 1912, the British Board of Trade set the standard for lifeboat safety at sea. Their rulebook, last updated in 1894, required ships over 10,000 tons to carry at least 16 lifeboats. The Titanic, at more than 46,000 tons, carried 20. On paper, it exceeded the law. In reality, those boats could hold just over 1,170 people, barely half of those on board. The regulation was never written for a ship this size. When the law was drafted, the largest liners afloat carried far fewer passengers and weighed less than a third of Titanic's tonnage. The Board of Trade had not revised its rules in nearly 2 decades, even as ships grew larger every year. Titanic's certificate of compliance was stamped and signed. No one was breaking the law. Shipbuilders, owners, and regulators all pointed to the same rulebook and called it safety. But the rule measured lifeboats by ship size, not by the number of lives at stake. The system created the illusion of security, numbers that looked official, a certificate that looked reassuring. The real risk was hidden in plain sight, disguised by regulations that had not kept pace with reality.
If you want more stories like this, like and subscribe. Your support helps us investigate the stories that still need answers.
6 ice warnings crossed the Titanic's wireless room on April 14th. Ships ahead described drifting bergs and thick ice fields, but the messages were logged and set aside. The Titanic steamed on at 22.5 knots, almost her top speed. In the culture of North Atlantic liners, arrival time was everything. Schedules were printed in newspapers. A late crossing meant lost business, and the White Star Line's reputation was built on reliability as much as luxury. J. Bruce Ismay, the company's managing director, walked the decks with pride. He was seen speaking with Captain Edward Smith that afternoon, discussing the prospect of arriving in New York ahead of schedule. Ismay's ambition was no secret, and the Titanic's maiden voyage was his showcase. But Smith was not reckless. He had 40 years at sea and a spotless record. The ice warnings prompted a small course change, slightly south, but not slower. The sea was calm and the night was clear. In 1912, the accepted practice was to keep speed unless fog or haze forced a reduction. Danger was measured against routine, and routine always won. The warnings became background noise, a risk so familiar it barely registered. By the time the lookout scanned the horizon that night, the ship's fate was already shaped by decisions made hours before. The moment the iceberg struck, the limits of Titanic's design were exposed. The hull was divided into 16 watertight compartments, but the bulkheads stopped short of the upper deck. The ship could stay afloat with any 2 or even 4 of these compartments flooded. 6 were breached. Instead of a single gash, the iceberg buckled the steel plates, opening seams along nearly 300 feet of the hull. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, understood the consequences at once. Water poured from one compartment to the next, overwhelming the barriers meant to contain disaster. The center propeller, unable to reverse, had left the ship less maneuverable in those final seconds. From that instant, survival was no longer a matter of skill or luck. The outcome was set. Officers moved quickly to uncover the lifeboats, but confusion spread along the decks. Some crew had never practiced a full evacuation. The scheduled drill that morning had been canceled. Orders varied from one side of the ship to the other. On one deck, men were allowed if seats remained. On another, only women and children were permitted. Passengers hesitated, many believing the ship was safer than a small boat in the freezing Atlantic. Lifeboat A, built for 65, left with just 12 aboard. Others were lowered half empty, precious minutes lost as crew and travelers waited for instructions that never came. The cost of untested plans became real, measured in empty seats and vanished chances. Within months of the sinking, maritime authorities faced a reckoning. Investigations on both sides of the Atlantic called for sweeping changes. The old standard, lifeboats by tonnage, was declared obsolete. In 1914, the first international convention for the safety of life at sea required enough lifeboats for every person aboard, no exceptions. An international ice patrol was established to monitor the North Atlantic and warn ships of drifting ice. These reforms did not come from a single failure, but from a system revealed to be unfit for a new era of ocean travel. The rules that once seemed sufficient were rewritten, not just for Titanic, but for every ship that followed. Today, safety standards exist because disaster exposed what confidence denied. Whenever we trust systems over scrutiny, history waits to repeat itself. Some warnings arrive too late. Thanks for watching.